The following video production is intended as an overview of a clinical problem and is not designed to suggest treatment for any specific individual or as a substitute for the professional services of an occupational therapist or other healthcare specialist.
I'm going to share with you an overview of a major hidden handicap, sensory defensiveness. I'm Pat Wilbarger. During my years of clinical practice, I've become very concerned about the problem experienced by those with sensory defensiveness. They're often misdiagnosed and poorly understood, and rarely treated directly and completely. Recent changes in both diagnosis and treatment bring new solutions to these problems. This video presents actual unrehearsed case consultations with excerpts from lectures to parents and other professionals.
Sensory defensiveness is an overactivation of our protective senses. Each of us has the ability to sense the potential danger of both major and minor threats. Our senses tell us when we are going to fall or when there is smoke in the air, when mosquitoes land on our skin or when it's too hot or too cold. Individuals with sensory defensiveness may experience certain harmless sensations as if they were dangerous or painful. Their clothes can feel like spiders crawling on their backs. Stairs can seem like cliffs. A gentle touch can be perceived as a dangerous attack. Tactile defensiveness was first described by Dr. A. Jean Ayres in 1964. She first identified these behaviors of alarm and defense in learning disabled children. While testing the sense of touch in children described as hyperactive, she noticed some similarity in the pattern of the test scores, but the behavior noticed during the testing was a major finding. There were many different versions of defensive responses. Ayres called these responses tactile defensiveness. Years of research and clinical practice have validated and expanded Dr. Ayres' findings. We have found that the tactile defensiveness could be present in any individual, not just the hyperactive or the learning disabled. It soon became obvious that symptoms of defense could be seen in all sensory systems. We will present an expanded view of sensory defensiveness by sharing some important cases from the clinical work of Patricia Wilbarger. Mrs. Wilbarger is an occupational therapist with graduate studies in counseling, psychology, and human development. Mrs. Wilbarger has been working with sensory processing theories for 30 years and has treated a wide range of clients. She has consulted and lectured throughout the world. She is a longtime colleague of Dr. Ayres, and with her co-founded the organization Sensory Integration International. We will join Mrs. Wilbarger as she lectures to parents and professionals and consults with 3 individuals who have sensory defensiveness.
I began treating Dustin in 1986. He was 12 months old, and every aspect of his life was compromised by serious sensory defensiveness. He'd been treated extensively in a medical center for 6 weeks before I saw him, but little progress had been made. His response to just 5 days of treatment was so surprising that it changed my way of working with sensory defensiveness ever after. This case is of historical significance, but also presents sensory defensiveness as seen in the infant population. We will see a tired Dustin who has worked all morning with weak muscles after only being used for 10 days. Will join his mother and his occupational therapist.
It's been 7 weeks, though, since we have been here to 7 weeks.
Yeah. 7 weeks and how many days?
Yeah, right.
What did he look like when he first came?
Would not tolerate being on his stomach at all.
He's a year old now, a year
had his
old
birthday
and 2
while he was
weeks
here.
at this point.
Right. Would occasionally reach out with a raking grasp to pick things up, but only if he chose to. Would not. Also didn't like to be held by anybody else other than mother.
But you could hold him.
Yes,
Yeah.
And how did you hold him? Mostly upright, didn't you? Straight up and down.
Yes, but he would still, if I was holding him, would avoid touching me.
He'd pull back from you, too.
It was like holding him out in midair, really, because he was out here and would not in any way touch his arms or upper body against me.
So the touching was a big issue.
A very large issue.
When he would sit upright well, but it was almost like he was just centered over his hips. would not shift weight,
It's really
very
stiff,
well at all.
stiff looking.
and had almost weak-looking shoulders, and would position himself when he was trying to get information and look at things. He would lean forward and maybe visually really investigate it, but would do no reaching with his hands. Would also position himself in an extreme extension with his arms
So he
back.
pull way back at that point. What about his eating and those things at that
Okay,
point?
the primary problem that he was brought into the hospital was a failure to thrive, catch-all, and because he was not eating. He was only breastfeeding at that for the last few months, and was not.
So taking in no other food.
Yeah, since about 7 months, I believe. Yeah. So he was not tolerating anything.
Dustin was diagnosed as failure to thrive and would only breastfeed. He did not use his hands. He wouldn't roll. He was unable to crawl or walk. He would not look at you, and he cried for 20 hours out of every 24. Dustin's treatment at the medical center included daily monitoring by a pediatrician, a behavioral pediatrician, and daily treatment by an occupational therapist, physical therapist, and a nutritionist. Caloric intake was brought to near normal by using a feeding tube in Dustin's nose, but he accepted no food by mouth. He was evaluated by adult and pediatric neurologists, orthopedic specialists, 3 child psychiatrists, audiologists, speech therapists, ophthalmologists, and a genetic specialist. He had bone age tests, endoscopic evaluations, and all these findings were within normal limits. He had an electrocephalogram and brainstem audio-evoked response tests, which were normal, but 2 small calcifications were detected on CAT scan.
So when I first saw you that day, it was about 10 days ago actually,
Right.
I immediately thought that he had some of the same characteristics of other babies that I had treated, particularly from an intensive care and nursery background. The diagnosis of tactile defensiveness had actually been made in Germany
Yes.
before he came, and you were just sort of relating to that at that point too. I had several issues really that were key. Number one, Dustin was only sleeping 2.5 hours at a time, which meant that you were only sleeping 2.5 hours at a time.
And this was
I felt I needed to interfere with the sleeping immediately. The second thing is that he was had the obvious pattern of a severely orally defensive mouth, which means a terrible feeling inside your mouth that makes you want to not have contact with anything that's of any texture. And so those were the 2 issues that I confronted immediately. Obviously, we've had a lot of success with this case. Can you remember the order in which these new skills occurred? I came over Friday night, and we tried to put him to sleep together,
Right.
but didn't get very far. And then we had already started doing heavy pressure inside the mouth. That was to balance out all the tactile receptors, and we'll demonstrate how that's done. But what was the first thing you noticed? Can you still remember how all this came in?
He started eating very well.
By Sunday,
Yes.
2 days later.
By Sunday, he was eating more than he's ever ate in several days at a time.
And this was pretty significant because his physician had told me that
Yes.
on Monday or Tuesday they were going to do gastrostomy.
Right.
At that point, he had a nasogastric tube in for
Yes.
feeding.
Mhm.
When did they take that out then?
On Sunday, they
They took it out on Sunday.
Yes, they did. They wanted to see if he was actually going to take in enough calories orally without the NG tube. If he did not take in enough calories on that Sunday, then they were going to go ahead with a gastrostomy because they didn't feel that there was any other way.
So the feeding immediately changed. And
It certainly did.
By Monday, what else was going on?
He took a bottle for the first time.
He took 8 ounces when he took it, too.
Yes,
didn't
yes,
he?
he
It
took
wasn't
a
like
whole-
he took a little.
He took a whole bottle. Once he got started, he just continued.
And before, you never had any chance
No.
to...
The minute I would even put a bottle up to his mouth, he would just start screaming just continually and would not stop.
No, no.
And how was he doing with sleeping? How was he-
Yeah, and when did the sleeping start changing?
About the same time, he immediately, once he started eating and taking a bottle, physically, everyone could see such a difference in him. He was a completely happier baby. A lot
And his
happier.
crying started reducing also
Oh,
on
yes,
Saturday,
his crying
actually.
started to reduce.
Oh, here's one.
He started sleeping better. A completely different boy from what he was just a few days prior.
And then I think on day 4 he started to, well, actually on Monday he started rolling also for the
Yeah.
first time.
Yeah, he is now, I feel like he feels like investigating, experimenting. He'll roll on his tummy and on his back and forth and play in his bed. Used to, he would not even tolerate any of that for even a minute. Now he'll lay there for hours and play and amuse himself and has a fun time.
What about the crying now, the amount of crying time? About how much does he cry right now?
Oh.
Could you, in terms of minutes, or
It's
you can pick him up?
very little now compared to what he used to. To be honest about it, this child would probably cry most of the day, the 24-hour period. We're talking about a very irritable baby who cried a lot.
All of the time, yeah.
Yes. Very few times when he was actually happy and content. I could put him in his stroller or the carriage, and that would help to
So
calm him and soothe him, but that
So
was
you'd
about
roll
the
him
only
around.
thing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
But if we stopped, it was...
yes,
it was disastrous.
right.
The other severe problem that I noticed right away was something that we all call postural insecurity, or being very frightened of any change in his head position and any kind of change of movement. And I think by Tuesday, which was on day 4, I already noticed a complete change in the postural insecurity. And then a lot of the movement behavior started coming. And I really have thought of these last 5 days as just been a refinement of some of the things we
Yeah.
got earlier.
Yes, it really is. Mhm.
At this
If this seems like remarkable progress, you're going to be even more surprised to learn that most of this was done by Dustin's mom. This treatment seems simple, but it's really quite complex. We had no time. I asked her to follow my instructions. It was my only hope to keep him from having a gastrostomy, a feeding tube in the stomach. I asked her to go inside Dustin's mouth with her finger and rub the roof of his mouth with pressure. This was to be done before each meal and once in between each meal. She was then asked to brush his legs, arms, and back, hands and feet with pressure using a non-scratching brush. She was to avoid his stomach because of the effects on the autonomic nervous system. This procedure needs to be followed by gentle joint compression. It all lasts for about 2 hours and needs to be repeated frequently. Let's join Dixie and she'll demonstrate this procedure.
Fix his mouth one more time so that we can play with Cheerios.
Want to play with some Cheerios? Want to play with some Cheerios? Come on. Good boy. Good boy. Want to brush? Here, let me brush you. Okay? Want me to brush you? Sure.
When you first started doing that to him, did he resist?
Oh, yes, he didn't like it.
Not at all.
Didn't like it at all.
I told you to do it with love.
Yes, and do it anyway.
So you snuck it in, and then you'd play with him, and you snuck
Yes.
it in, and you
Yes.
play. And how quickly did he learn to like it?
Really, within a very short time, I would say a couple of days, he just, to the point where he really liked it.
And
Don't
he
you?
started giggling and laughing.
Oh,
and-
yes, he giggles and laughs, don't you? Yes, and he really seems to really enjoy it. And you start doing it now, and you can just, especially of an evening when I'm getting him ready for bed, you can just tell he just loves it.
Seems to be a jubilant social child, and he's, for the first time, been away from you some, too.
Yes, right, for the
Which
first
is,
time.
and
in a
acting
year.
well. and
In a
acting
year.
great.
Had
had I not been pushed to the wall to just really cut an efficient, effective treatment concept to literally insisting that it be done immediately, and had this been a case in which lots of other people saw this child during the weekend, then all of this would have been cluttered. Or even if the mother had been so-called anxious, neurotic, resistant, too compliant, to anything. But this is, to me, was a very clean, clear case. I left on Friday night at 10:30. His physician left with me. The 12 pediatricians that made rounds on the hospital staff every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday came back Monday morning. They left a disaster. They come back in. Here this kid is eating. Now, when he started eating, you know, she didn't eat like, let's have 2 or 3 tablespoons here. We're talking about the first meal, 3 full jars full of baby food. We're talking about Saturday nights going from waking up every 3 hours to sleeping 6 hours. Sunday night, 8 hours. Forever after 8 hours or whatever more. We're talking about a kid who never even thought of taking naps, starting to take naps on Sunday. So can you imagine the surprise of the pediatricians when they came back on Monday? I mean, that was a shock, a big shock to them. It wasn't so much of a shock to me because I also saw him on Monday. But I was stunned by Wednesday when this kid's development just unfolded. A child I never did any therapy for rolling started rolling. A child who I never did a single minute worth of therapy to get him to use his hands, using his hands. Never a minute of work on the vestibular system to get his gravitational security back. Starting not to be afraid of movement. A child who needed to have gaze aversion for many minutes out of every hour, looking at you, laughing at you, engaging with you. A child who didn't know what it was like to play at anything. All he wanted to do was to have no more pain. Starting to play all of the time and laugh. Because he showed me, number one, you can use the sensory input from one sensory channel and clear many other ones. You can use that tactile and that pressure system coupled with joint compression as a sensory summation technique, and it will be effective for a lot of things, more than we even realized. Number two, parents can be effective interveners if they take the diagnosis seriously. If they know this is something you cannot keep in your life. But you know what? We're used to this. When we have this around us, we're used to it. Changing it itself is a threat because we know what it's like to have these little defensiveness. So parents, Dixie took this seriously. They were going to ship her back with a tube in this kid. She was desperate. I was desperate. She took this diagnosis seriously. We take this sensory defensiveness seriously. We're not going to feel comfortable letting it stay. And if that means that we have to watch a child, a young adult, or somebody older, go through life being a little bit tortured every day by the events that come into them, that they steel themselves against, then we have to wonder if we impose something that bothers them for 2 minutes, whether that isn't going to be somehow better if it actually approaches the problem directly than it would be if we just let them have a little bit of this irritation or major agitation all across the day.
Sensory defensiveness is described in 3 very different levels of severity: mild, moderate, and severe. A mild sensory defensiveness may hardly be noticed. The person may be described as picky, oversensitive, touchy, slightly overactive, withdrawn, or resistant to change. There can be mild irritations, controlling behaviors, and a tendency to avoid certain things. They may be very particular about the clothes they wear or not enjoy crowds, but they are able to appear normal. A moderate problem is one that affects 2 or more areas of a person's life. They may have difficulty with social relations, may isolate themselves from peers, or be overly aggressive. Many self-care skills are affected, such as dressing, bathing, or eating. Exploration and risk behaviors are often limited due to anxiety and fear. They are often referred to as anxious, neurotic, phobic, compulsive, aggressive, or controlling. A severe level of sensory defensiveness affects every aspect of a person's life. There is an overreaction to all sensory experiences. These individuals are described with other diagnostic labels such as autism, severe developmental delays, severe anxiety and stress reactions, agoraphobic or near psychotic. All levels deserve to be treated. Treatment brings freedom to the mild problems, choices to the moderate level, and makes other kinds of treatment more effective for the severe level. Many types of sensory defensiveness have been described. Tactile defensiveness may be an overreaction to light and unexpected touch. They may dislike or avoid such things as hugs, hair washing, crowds, etc. Oral defensiveness is an irritation experienced in the mouth. This can result in a dislike of certain textures or combinations of food in the mouth, and in eating disorders in severe cases. Gravitational insecurity or postural insecurity is fearfulness and avoidance of certain positions, movement, or loss of contact with the ground. Auditory defensiveness refers to oversensitivity to certain sounds. Visual defensiveness may include poor visual attention, gaze aversion, or oversensitivity to light. Smell and taste sensitivity is heightened awareness of taste and smell. Let's meet John and his mother, Joan. Mrs. Wilbarger will be consulting with Jackie, an occupational therapist who has just evaluated John's problems. John is 9 years and 3 months old. He's the oldest of 4 children. He has been identified at his summer camp as needing occupational therapy evaluation and treatment. He's been followed intensely by a pediatrician and has seen a psychologist for 3 years. The psychologist has diagnosed him as having attention deficit disorder. John has normal to superior intelligence, good academic skills, and he works at his appropriate grade level.
So you've only seen each other maybe, what, 3 times or something?
About 2 weeks
This is
ago,
the
I think.
third time
Yeah.
we've
Third
seen each
time.
other.
Wow.
I've seen John for 2 hours just during the evaluation stage.
Jackie, what evaluations have you used already with him?
I used the sensory history, I used the Beery, I used the TVPS, and I used the Brunitz-Ostrowski.
And the sensory integration and praxis tests you didn't?
No.
You haven't, that was not. What kinds of things on the test did you find that was significant?
Well, the most significant thing that I found was the sensory history form that his mother filled out. I mean, I didn't need to go any farther after I saw that. There were specific tactile problems, vestibular problems, some auditory problems. He had deficits in just about all of the areas. And I had her fill out 3 different sensory history forms, and they were all real reliable with each other. He also has some fine motor problems and specifically some balance equilibrium problems that I picked up on the B&O, the Brunitz-Ostrowski.
Evaluation of sensory defensiveness involves the use of objective tests, clinical observations, and a clinical interview called a sensory history. The interview will be open-ended and will involve questions about each sensory system. A description of daily activities of the client will further help identify problems related to sensory defensiveness, as well as how each individual has been trying to cope with these symptoms. We will begin to see that the kinds of questions that are being asked will confirm the diagnosis of sensory defensiveness. This process will also be the first step in treating sensory defensiveness, becoming aware of the problem, the seriousness of the symptoms, and how each person has tried to compensate for these difficulties.
Let's go way back to the beginning. You know all those questions that people ask you about pregnancy,
Yes.
and they go through all this
Yes.
stuff.
I have those memorized now.
Tell me a little bit about that ritual answer.
My pregnancy was excellent until the 36th week when I was hospitalized because I was preeclamptic. They had to induce labor, of course, and my body was not ready. I was 36 weeks, and my body wasn't ready to have a baby, so they did it again, and eventually John was born. He was healthy. He was 6 pounds, 12 ounces when he was born.
That's great. Did he seem stiff and sort of balled
yeah.
up?
He nursed, and then he goes like this. I said, come on, John, we're going to cuddle. No, he goes like this. And he wouldn't cuddle. I mean, he would only cuddle if you fell asleep. He would finally go, collapse.
And then
Putting him to sleep was interesting because my friends thought I was nuts. But to put him to sleep, you go like this on his back. He would cry. You go like this.
And then
calm down eventually. And you try to teach your babysitters. They're like, Mrs. O'Connell, are you nuts or what? You know?
perfect technique.
Was that good?
Absolutely.
It worked very well for him.
Yep.
You had to do that for 5 or 10 minutes, but then he would you could just feel his body.
I
just
understand that very well.
Thank you so much. I just needed that. But something like this would just make him so nervous. He's like, don't do that,
Oh,
and he spit up all the time. Poor Mama, your heart, the grandpa wouldn't hold him because he's spitting up. I said, Grandpa, get it together and hold the baby, okay? But,
right.
yeah, really. But, so it's an awkward situation. It's your first baby. You keep thinking, it's my first baby. It's my perfect first baby, right? Of course. What else do you have when you have your first baby?
Did you lose a lot of sleep early on? Did he wake up? Yeah. What is sleep?
Because John was born at 6'12", but he's been growing ever since, and he's very big.
And he's gotten.
He's big and he's strong, and he doesn't very easily understand space. Like this is my space and that's your space. And if somebody gets within
Close.
5 inches of him, it's his space.
Right. And what does he do? Does he actually hit out quite a lot?
Yeah.
When did you first notice that?
As soon as he stood up.
As soon as he was big enough, huh?
Yeah. And now he's not malicious, which is amazing. That's the other problem.
Yeah.
He's not malicious at all.
No, I understand this completely.
No, most people don't.
Well,
It's
I
like,
think
your child is hitting my child, and obviously there's a problem, and you need to speak
Right.
to your child, and you need to this to your child, and you're going like, forget it.
So I think that's one of the keys is the more we understand what really is going on with John and his nervous system and what his nervous system's getting back, we'll understand, I think, that this aggression isn't true aggression. It's more defense. Has he been a child that's been really affectionate all the way through, or has he pushed you away pretty much?
No, he pushes. He will receive a hug, but you have to warn him and come at him from a certain direction and,
and tell him it's going
work
to
your
happen.
way up his back and, not his back, work your way up his shoulders. And I usually talk to him as I'm coming up to him. My personal opinion is that he needs to be hugged whether he likes it or not.
Ah,
And,
yes.
I'm
Have
his
you always
mother.
felt that way? And,
Well, yeah.
I mean, you've always just sort of gone in there and
I need to
said,
hug him because I'm his mother.
Yes,
hey,
exactly.
Man, you need to be. I mean, I hug him
Yeah.
like that a lot, actually.
Right.
Grab him and just go, "Hi, John, how's it going? What's happening?" And
That's perfect.
You like that?
Yeah, I love that.
You like
because
it?
we, for one, know that when we put a lot of pressure on the skin, well, then we're really making it safe for him. It
Make
sounds
contact.
real strange, but the
Yeah.
pressure on the skin cancels out a lot of the defensive things that we're really
Yeah.
worried about.
Yeah.
Boy, what great intuition you had with that.
Well, should I tell you a secret?
Yeah.
I think that a lot of this is in my life as well.
Ah.
So
Yes.
a lot of it comes very naturally. It's like,
Yeah, let me tell you that
If
in
I
about
wanted-
50% of the cases that we look at,
Sure.
we find family connections.
Oh, sure.
Too. What other things about the sense of touch do you notice? Does he select special clothes, for instance?
he doesn't select clothes if preferable. He would prefer to have long sleeves and long pants on at all times, preferably
Summer or
cotton.
winter?
Oh yeah.
Did you notice this clothing thing very early in his life?
Well, now don't forget this is my inclination as well. So most of the things in my house
Yeah.
are cotton,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
I incline toward comfortable things for my children. I
So
incline
you
toward
were
corduroy.
reading it already and
It's just the
going
way
with
that
it.
polyester gets
you
removed.
Right. Yeah. How about
I'm-
labels? Do you take labels out of your clothes?
no, but I tuck them in. If they're not
Uh-huh.
tuck-inable, I will usually do something else to them.
Cut them out or?
I've never had cutting them out is worse because then you have the frayed edge
Oh.
against your neck.
Do new clothes bother him?
Oh, there's no such thing as new clothes in our house.
Okay. So you
we
wash
don't buy new clothes.
You wash your clothes if you get new clothes a lot before you wear them first, or you just flat out don't buy new clothes?
I buy secondhand clothes.
Yeah,
And I
right.
used to think that was a money-saving technique.
No.
Now that I've met Anna, I think
They're
it's a
soft
survival technique.
It absolutely is.
John doesn't wear new clothes. I think
sure he
he's had
wouldn't,
one new thing, and it was like sweatpants, which was reasonably tolerable.
Yeah.
But you have to wash them, and then they sit. What I do with new clothes is I leave them in the closet for about a year,
Exactly.
and then
I've
eventually I
heard
get
that many
used to them
times.
sitting there, and then eventually I think about it, and
And then you slowly work your way
Right.
into
Yeah.
doing that. Yeah.
I buy myself secondhand clothes too. New
Yeah.
things just
Well, they're stiff.
Make me
There's a
nervous.
lot of stuff.
yeah. and
There's
they
a lot
smell
about
bad.
it.
They smell terrible.
They do.
Oh yes.
Oh, I hadn't heard
Oh
about
yeah.
that.
And the
Yeah.
smell gives you a headache, and I mean sort of a.
It sort of
It's-
goes around.
yeah.
Yeah. Things like hair washing, hair cutting,
Oh, no.
face washing. All of those
Oh,
are
no, no, no,
awful
no.
things.
Oh,
Yeah.
the pediatrician told us John was about 4, and I mentioned that we were having a tremendous lot of trouble getting his hair washed. And he said,
Mm-hmm.
oh, just wash his hair. And,
And
something
did
in
you?
me said, no way.
Uh-huh.
No
Right.
way.
Right.
I cannot dump water in this child's head.
So you've really
Well,
protected
it's
him.
been, well, yeah, I've protected him, but I've also protected myself because the anxiety, the hysteria,
Oh,
the
absolutely.
screaming, you
Oh,
are killing me,
absolutely.
mother. You know, I mean, he doesn't exactly say it that way, but you may as well. I mean, if the windows are open, you can forget it. You get the domestic violence call, and you're up. You know.
No,
I was watching
you're
the child.
abusing your child.
I was just trying to watch his hair.
Now, do you notice that John has some good hours that are better, that he's less sensitive and less needing to, sort of push out his space and
Well, sure. If you leave him completely by himself
by himself?
on his own time frame,
Uh-huh.
which
That
for you and
works out
I, or
better?
at least maybe for you to get dressed in the morning, is something like 20 minutes or 30 minutes
Mhm.
peacefully, to not get real dressed up.
And his dressing was about an hour and a half?
Oh, no. 3, 4
3 and 4 hours.
hours if he's
Right.
on his own time schedule.
Right.
This makes going to school very interesting.
Yeah, it does.
Um,
What do you do? I don't see how you get around that one.
Well, you have rules. John
Mhm.
follows rules.
And
Plus
what
it's
is
hard.
his rule?
We have a rule that says before you eat breakfast, you have to be dressed.
Ah.
And John is very hungry. Because
So
John's a big
he
boy.
just barrels through?
He hates that. He hates it, and he tells us about it every single morning. This is a stupid rule.
Mhm.
I don't see why I should, da, 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 da. And you
Mm.
just basically ignore that,
Mhm.
and you go back to, do you have your shirt on yet? And you have to
Right.
break it down. Do you have your shirt on yet?
Mm.
As he gets older, he's been able to maybe put his shirt and his pants on in the same direction. But you as a parent, I get concerned with how much
Oh, I know
provision
you
I'm
do.
making here. How much they call it codependency. How codependent are we being here?
I think that's very
but
much
it's-
part of this whole syndrome, by the way. I call it parents held hostage.
Mm-hmm.
And that is another way of saying codependency.
Right.
Because, you learn to protect him in
Well, sure.
ways that are just and you don't even know. You
Right.
don't even know you're being controlled right away.
Yeah.
But it's partly for his own, to save him.
Well, it's very tricky to figure out the difference between helping him to grow into something and keeping him from getting mutilated.
That's right. Yeah.
Um,
And I think we're going to be able to cut through all this, by the way.
I love it.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
I can't help but think that we shouldn't maybe try to cut through it for you, too.
Yes, that would be very helpful.
I really, really do.
I'm
because,
interested in staying alert to whatever I'm picking up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because I really think that one of the things that we'd like to find people with these problems before they become adults,
That would be nice.
because the problem starts compounding.
Mm-hmm.
And it's my feeling that we learn ways of protecting ourselves that even when we don't need the protection, we have that personality style. Why didn't you think all these things were happening? I'm always curious to see what people think this is coming from. When they see this, it's just John's
Exactly.
peculiar.
I
Yeah,
didn't
that's
particularly
just the
much
way
care
John
where or how. I was interested in
solving the
changing
problem.
it or fixing it or dealing
Right.
with it, but I wasn't
Right.
particularly interested in
Yeah.
why, I suppose.
I partly say that because different people have so many different names for this very phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
This is talked about like anxiety and
Mhm.
neurotic behavior and all of this. But when
Schizophrenia
you
is the
pair it
latest
right,
offering.
yeah. But when you pair it right down and you look at the sensory systems
Mhm.
and then you see how the brain is interpreting all of this as being terribly dangerous.
The treatment of sensory defensiveness involves 3 approaches: awareness of the problem, planned and scheduled activities called a sensory diet, and a professionally guided direct treatment. Let's join Mrs. Wilbarger as she presents these ideas to John's mother.
You know already that if you're aware of exactly what this is, and call it by sensory defensiveness or tactile defensiveness or being afraid of movement or something sensory oriented, already you're taking the neurosis and all those words away.
Mm-hmm.
And that's real important.
Yes, I think so.
And it's also important to be able to become even more sophisticated at being able to manage the problem.
Mhm.
And it's also trying to help your relatives understand that they, clearly know that this is not an eccentricity. It's a characteristic that happens, that could happen to any of us under the right conditions. But some nervous systems, respond to this really, really differently. There's no nervous system that we couldn't take and throw it into defense. So being aware is really the first level of being able to solve this problem. If we had to stop there, that would be too bad, though. A lot of people do have to stop there. The second thing is there are certain activities that we do that make us feel really centered and better.
Mhm.
And we need to think about what John's interested in, what kinds of things seem to collect him, what kinds of ways we can organize his environment to make everything that happens to him something that contributes to his, organization instead of takes away from it.
Mhm.
For instance, there are a few things that we know across all nervous systems that seem to work. And we know if he uses his muscles really heavily, that is actually a therapeutic thing.
That's funny.
Yeah, isn't that weird?
Yeah.
And we know that if we have to, the more parts of his body that has to work simultaneously, the better it will be. With heavy work and full body action like that, it lasts in the nervous system a couple of hours. And so then we need to sort of put a time frame on what we, look at. Also, any kind of movement that we use. Jackie's going to have some special pieces of equipment that we can move him slowly in certain positions. And she's going to be able to put stuff in looking like games and having a big time with games. But it's going to be able to last in the nervous system for maybe 6 to 8 hours. And anything that we, for instance, routines that we can put in that will anticipate the sensory problems that are coming up. We can, give him, extra kind of input at certain key points. And my word for this, by the way, is a sensory diet. It's the same thing as a nutritional diet, only you don't wait 3 days before you eat. And with sensory defensiveness, you really have to parcel out and make sure the nervous system is optimized. The third measure is a direct treatment approach that we have used now for about 30 years, actually. Started with Jean Ayres, you mentioned her book, but she was testing a lot of hyperactive kids to try to find out what sensory processing elements they had in common. Everybody was looking at hyperactivity in those days, in 1964. And what she found out from giving them all these sensory tests that, wow, their scores sure weren't the same. But the way they approached the testing sure was, because they would move out of range and try to get the examiner to quit testing their sense of touch, and would rub or say, I have to go to the bathroom, or my mother doesn't want me to do this anymore. But there was an avoidance sort of quality, and she started using this word tactile defensiveness because she saw it during the tactile tests. And it wasn't until later that we realized that it wasn't just the sense of touch that was being avoided here, although, it's obviously the questions I asked you about that was easy to answer, whereas some of the others are kind of hard. It really is all the senses that are in defense. And so, but, by knowing that, she then hypothesized some interesting things about the nervous system and the way the sense of touch was carried to the brain and in the brain. But that led her to use a lot of heavy pressure on the skin in therapy. Like, for instance, she would use terry cloth towels, and she'd use various types of brushes, and she'd use various types of things that would be natural to rub on the skin, like lotion, and put kids in big containers full of beans to play where they would give them pressure and stuff like that. The difference between what I want to try with John and that all is that we're a lot more sophisticated neurologically now. And also we've run across, quite by accident, the fact that if we use a surgical scrub brush to put pressure on the skin, and we follow it by exciting some of the receptors in the joints, the combination of that just hits the brain all at once and creates a remediation of the defense. And so it's called a sensory summation technique. I mean, that basically means that you can, these are the brushes that we use with that. And one of the things, by being sensory defensive yourself, just looking at something like this is likely to arouse, make your anxiety. I mean, your imagination can create such anxiety in you, I know. So
How do you know that?
Well, I've been hanging around with an awful lot of folks like you for a long time. And but the key feature to this is it has 1,000 bristles, so I can hit a lot of receptors really quick. And then I can put in what we call joint compression. Now, when we use this, we know it probably doesn't last more than 2 hours. And so when we start using this, our main objective is to put it in every 2 hours if we can. But you know, we don't also want to ritualize it. We don't want to put it in like a recipe that is hard and fast, and if you break it, my God, you're in deep trouble, you know. So I think it's important to be kind of, you know, loose about it a bit. What we do, and what I want you to do with John, well, I want to discuss this with John first. I think that you've heard about this business of our brushing kits?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I thought I would like to try that on you. And how do you feel about that?
Okay.
Okay, I think we'd need to take your jacket off, though. Are you up
Yeah.
for that?
And this, right?
Okay, yeah, appreciate that.
I had two.
You have two. Well, we
Yeah,
have a lot
this
of
one to keep
we
me
got a lot of
warm.
heat up here, so we don't have any problems with that. It's easier if we brush without your clothes, but this is good.
Yeah.
If we need to brush right through your clothes, we'll do that too.
How
at
could
home.
you do that? Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's not as effective, but that's good.
Should I have my shoes off?
Nah, that's fine. We don't want to be too wild about this. All I'm going to do is, you tell me, do you want me to do this harder or softer?
That's
Harder?
okay.
You want a little harder?
No, that's
You
okay.
sure? That's
Yeah,
okay.
sure.
I can power out more if you want.
Okay.
Okay, I want to get your back real good. The receptors on your back are real far apart, and backs don't get very good attention,
Yeah.
people. There we go. Okay, I'm going to just, harder or softer, what do you think?
Okay.
That's perfect?
Yeah.
It's enough pressure. I was just trying to put
Yes.
pressure on your skin here. I want to get plenty on your hands, and the palms of your hands especially. Okay, and then I'm going to move right over here. I'm just going to power out with your legs. That's right. Let me just try to get a little bit of them like that. I want to do this real quick so that it doesn't take very long. Just want your brain to hear about all this stuff all at once.
Oh.
Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to, can you count to 10?
Yeah.
I'm going to push on you. 1, 2, 3.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay, and I'll go as fast as you want. 1.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
There are several things to notice here. I began brushing John directly without much explanation because I didn't want him to become fearful through anticipation. I tried to give him the feeling that he could direct this treatment, but in fact, if he had asked to be brushed harder or softer, I would not have changed my technique. I wanted to distract him and make him feel as if he had some control. You notice when John began, he had poor eye contact and his speech was somewhat slowed. Be sensitive to these changes. Pull and push on these fingers a little bit. Boom, 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 boom.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay, and then we're going to push and 2, 4,
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay, I'm going to do this together.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Woo! How do you feel?
Okay.
I want you to brush him.
Oh boy, Johnny get brushed twice.
Hmm?
Do you want to
Yeah.
sit down or stand up for this? I guess you better sit down, because otherwise they can't get it properly. You want this side first?
Yeah.
You tell me if I'm doing it right.
You push harder than
Yeah.
that. Here, I want you to brush me just for a minute. Harder. Okay.
I don't want to squish the brush, you know.
Now squish the brush.
You know, I can't hang on to this thing.
Yeah, I know. It's hard. Just do the best you can.
Okay,
Don't worry
here we go.
about it.
Is that better, Dan?
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
If it scratches, I want you to tell her.
Okay. Think I'm doing it good?
I think you're doing it great.
Dan, okay, you do your legs and I'm going to do your back. Okay, ready, set, go.
Okay.
Can you do that once? That's pretty good. Just good forward a little bit. Please. All right.
I want you to do it every couple of hours. And don't want you to absolutely never brush your stomach, okay? Well, good to see you both again.
It's good to be here.
The other day, now, how many days has it been since we've been together? That was on Thursday, wasn't it? Now today's Sunday, so that's 4 days almost. What did you think, John, when I, you know, gave you that brush and started brushing you last time? How did that feel to you the first time?
Good.
Was it okay?
Yeah.
I noticed you didn't pull back at all. We gave you some suggestions, and do you remember what was we told you at that point?
No.
We wanted you to brush pretty often, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, and use joint compression after that. Isn't that a strange word to use?
Yeah.
That means pushing on your bones, huh? Yeah. What happened after you left? You drove home, and when was the first time afterwards that you brushed? Do you remember how it all went, or is it sort of all a blur right now?
I think when I went to bed, maybe.
Uh-huh.
Did Daddy brush you before you went to bed?
Your dad brushed you right before you went to bed. Did you understand why we had you do this brushing and pushing on your muscles?
No.
You have some questions for me?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I don't really. It's one thing about the brushes
Uh-huh.
that there's these two different kinds, and my mom doesn't know which one's best.
Do you know what? I think that's one of the most important things that we can answer, because do you know that I found when kids around the country get brushed, if they get brushed with the wrong brush, boy, we're in deep trouble, because it hurts. And what this needs to be a non-scratching pressure brush. And you know that we've even noticed that if we brush in this direction, the little bristles bend, and it doesn't, you can put in as much pressure as you want. If you turn it around just like this, it turns out to be pretty scratchy. And I forget to tell people to try to do what makes them feel the best. Now let me check out this brush for you.
This is the one you gave us.
This is the one. Okay, now this again is real soft, but again, if you turn it this way, it's going to be a little rougher. Can I share with you another brush?
Yeah.
Look at this one. Feel it a little bit. What do you think about that one?
Hard.
Dangerous.
No, it doesn't. Yeah. So for me, the bristles won't even bend.
Exactly. Can you imagine some kid being given this brush by a therapist, though? I mean, you know, and I didn't really know that all the brushes weren't safe
That's
when
a
I
surgical
first
brush,
started.
right?
Yeah, it's a surgical brush, and it looks virtually like a brush that would be good. So one of the things already you're going to have to watch out for is if the brushes get stiff for any reason, you're not going to want to use them.
No.
Now, your system's a little more sensitive than the average parent, but you can imagine that parents have to take a lot of this on faith.
Oh, yes.
They have to really believe that we have done some work around it. And I think the fact that we've gone through thousands of kids helps me personally to feel more comfortable. But you know, the therapists that are doing this for the first time haven't seen 1,000 children.
Right.
So I think, you know, see, I've had some good teachers, and all of them have been kids.
Do you know what was helpful to me?
They're my favorite professors.
What was helpful to me is Jackie was explaining to us, Jackie Kilburn was explaining how to do this after we had a session the other day. And just for the other OTs that might do this, what was helpful to me was she just told us, like, she was telling us how to handle insulin. She was very authoritative, and she was very straightforward. And she pointed out that it was a little silly, but she was, okay, now you must pay attention to what I'm going to say. She was taking care of my husband first. She was brushing him to teach him how to do it. And she said to me, now you make sure you pay attention, because I'm going to say some very important things. She was very, very firm about the whole thing. It was like, oh, okay then.
That's
and
right.
she was handling it like it was important, because it is.
It is, and it's
that
a
made
serious
difference for me.
issue.
She wasn't just going, you know, well, I don't know if this will work or not. She said, you really need to respect this and make sure you call me. And she made a big deal out of making sure that I was in touch with her. And in fact, I had to call her over the weekend.
Absolutely.
I said, I don't quite understand this that's going on. And
Absolutely.
her attitude was helpful, even though I already understood that it was an important thing.
Yes.
Her attitude was helpful, I think, in helping me to just shape up, you know, pay
Absolutely.
attention.
And I feel it's extremely important to take the diagnosis seriously. I think when people think, oh, it's just another thing, or we've been living with this all these years, and why change it, and all of these things, I think it's really, they don't realize how serious it is and how much we can do if we get rid of it. So that's a good thing. Your husband caught on to this relatively quickly, too?
Yeah.
What kind of changes have you noticed?
One thing was the main thing that I noticed was, John, did you notice how quickly you were able to get dressed the other day after we brushed you in the morning? Were you aware of that?
No.
Well, every single morning that we've been, that's Friday and Saturday and today, I brushed John when he woke up. And the first morning I said the usual, which is some 2 or 3 or 4 statements to the effect that it's time to get dressed, plus pointing out where the clothing is. John typically would take either many more reminders or many more minutes to arrive dressed. But in every case, he arrived downstairs dressed in the amount of time it would take to get dressed, which is unprecedented.
And you explained that there was an hour and a half sometime for him to get dressed.
Especially on days where there was nothing to do. I mean, there was nothing pressing, no school to go to.
That's incredible.
The neat thing about it is
good work.
Absolutely. The neat thing is, in my understanding of trying to track down what is going on here, is that now for John, he recognizes no difference. Which
Exactly.
tells me that his goal is to get dressed. And
Right.
that
I don't want him to see any
block-
difference.
There's a block between getting dressed and wanting to get dressed. And a lot of my friends will say, well, he just doesn't want to get dressed. I say, I do not believe that that's true.
I don't either.
That,
Not for a minute.
Right. And so here he's got the same attitude and a more responsive system, and poof, he arrives dressed.
Absolutely. And that points out another thing that I think is real interesting, and people would like for me to list out all the things that are going to happen because you normalize the nervous system. But there's no way to do that.
No.
The product that occurs is the products that happen when you're an integrated person.
Right. Right.
And it could be 1,000 things.
Right.
And not even 1,000 things you'd think about.
Right.
What other kinds of
I was
things?
also noticing him taking initiative. A lot of times at the breakfast table, John arrives and he's ready, but he's a little bit disoriented at the table. And the other day he came down and he was experiencing a little bit of disorientation, but on his own he initiated getting syrup for the French toast that was being prepared. He got up, went and got it, and said, "There it is." And this is the essence of John that I know. He's a willing, able worker, and then there's this something that gets between that and has been able to produce that way.
Do you have any other questions for me, John?
No, not really.
Now, Jackie's always going to be available on the phone, and you're going to see her regularly every week. And it's real important that if anything comes up, that you really touch base with her. One of the things, this looks so simple, that you wonder if you need to be monitored by anybody. You know, if anybody just couldn't do this. And in fact, I think it is pretty simple and effective. But it really helps if you have somebody who knows sensory processing theory on tap to be able to use it effectively, I think, and safely. And this is very, very new idea. You know, a lot of people in the country don't even know about any of this. And so I think that those of us who do it first really need to collect the ideas and make it better so that when other people start using it, it's easier for them. You've learned a lot about yourself over the course of this last period, I think, haven't you? Have you been going to a therapist?
Yeah. After we got
when did that
John's
start?
diagnosis. In 1987.
Yeah,
we
and
took
then
John and I was with him, and while they were describing an attention deficit disorder, I just said,
That's
guess
me.
what, folks? This is my life. We're talking.
If untreated, sensory defensiveness continues into adulthood. John's mother, Joan, shares some of her perceptions during 2 interviews after it's discovered that she has lived with sensory defensiveness all her life.
Should I tell you a secret?
Yeah.
I think that a lot of this is in my life as well.
Ah.
So
Yes.
a lot of it comes very naturally. It's like,
Yeah, let me tell you that
If
in
I
about
wanted-
50% of the cases that we look at,
Sure.
we find family connections.
Oh, sure.
Too. You're used to that tension to get through life. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I
Right.
guess maybe the change from tension to, I did an exercise the other day. We were at a stress management thing, and somebody said, okay, now just close your eyes and think about a time when you're perfectly relaxed.
Oh
I
my
sat
God.
there.
Oh
I
well.
sat there. I thought, I wonder if anybody else is having this problem. I sat there, and I could only come up with one. You know, I think the terminology was something like, were you perfectly comfortable? And I came up with all these official recreational things, and I went right past all those because I knew I was like this. You know, even in
Exactly.
the middle of this very relaxed, hot tub. My, this is lovely, you know.
Right.
Can we leave now? My poor husband. So I completely collapsed. I'm like, Patrick, is that enough? Nonsense. Whirlpools.
Is it over yet? Is it over yet?
Saunas. Oh my gosh, those things are awful.
Can you think of any time that you really?
Yes, I did. It was.
What?
I can't remember what I thought of. I was supposed to be able to do this and remember it, but I'm sure that won't work. There was a singular incident. I know what it was. It was in a dance class when I was about 19 years old. Okay, this is the last incident I can remember being completely relaxed. I was about 19. We were doing a thing called constructive rest position, which you may or may not have a familiarity
Oh,
with.
yes. Oh, yes.
And the teacher, I trust the teacher very much, so therefore I could keep my eyes closed without wondering whether they were going to hurt me or not. And it was just exactly the right temperature in the room, and I had a very good class, and that is the last time I can remember being completely comfortable.
Exactly. Well,
Because everything was
and
comfortable.
think about it.
My brain was comfortable, my body was
Your
comfortable.
brain,
everything was
yes, and your
comfortable.
trust, and
Yeah.
also you'd worked really hard
Yes.
before,
Right.
Heavy work.
which
Right.
is the key, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
And then,
And I was pleased with the class. I'm sure
Right.
I was pleased with the way the class had gone, and we were just totally exhausted. So that
Yes.
helps too. That's
and
one of the criteria
that
for
kind of
relaxing.
physical exhaustion to get you near that, but not at that,
Right.
is will be one of our objectives. You have to be real careful about bumping into people
Oh,
and
yeah.
going in crowds, and you don't go to
You don't go to
you don't
crowds.
shop you don't shop in crowds.
I don't shop, remember? I go to secondhand stores.
Right, but they can be
Um,
crowded, and
They can be crowded, but you leave.
you know when to go, though.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
you know, I don't go to crowds.
And
Things
grocery
like
store,
World's
what do
Fair
you
is
do
the
about
biggest joke.
grocery store?
Grocery stores, I have to brace myself for grocery stores.
You get yourself ready and then go in, huh?
I think about it a long time. I don't try to take a list because I can't do a list and the grocery store at the same time, if that makes any sense.
No, I understand.
So it's up here.
You started brushing yourself Thursday.
Mhm.
And you did it yourself. Has Patrick brushed you?
Mhm.
And then you do joint compression. Have you learned how to do the joint compression totally independent? I mean, you push. What strategies do you use?
I use this.
Pushing.
Is this right? I hope.
Yeah.
I do this one, and then my neck is I've had physical therapy on my neck, so I'm going gently on that.
Oh yeah.
Anyway,
be
I do
really
this very
careful
gently,
with this.
kind of perfunctorily.
Uh-huh.
I jump.
Jump.
I jump from
Up
my
and down.
feet. Also, I might do pliés. Would that work? Okay.
Oh,
So I do
fabulous.
pliés, just keep it, because I don't want to
In
smash
fact,
my
all
joint.
the dance workup
Yeah.
is fabulous. In
It
fact,
feels
if
like
you
it.
could do the brushing and then the dance workup, that would be the combination that would be ideal. Did you brush yourself right before you went to bed?
Yeah,
And did you sleep better?
I
or-
did, actually.
You did?
Yes, I did,
Yeah.
specifically, especially because I'm in this trying to
Right.
train myself to sleep again mode. Yeah, I slept very well.
And any other changes you've noticed? This isn't a very long time, of course. 3 days is
No,
no
I
big
think
deal.
relaxing is a very big change for me.
The social and emotional behaviors that develop because of sensory defensiveness are another major problem. Joan is a rather successful and remarkable person, but after 39 years, the effects of sensory defensiveness have influenced all aspects of her social and emotional development. She's worked with psychologists and has been in various treatment programs for the symptoms directly related to her sensory defensiveness. Now that direct treatment of these symptoms are possible, she'll still find her style and her habits very difficult to change, but now she'll be free to benefit from other therapies.
My stock belief right now is clearly that one must rule out sensory defensiveness in every diagnosis and clear it up so we can get on with the real work of therapy, which is doing the thing we know best, treating the other things. To me, this is not the treatment. It is the first 5 minutes of therapy. And more alarmed am I about those people that have totally normal systems except sensory defensiveness, because they won't get referred to anyone. They will be walking the streets in this partial defense alarm pain, and no one will pick them up. The handicapped kids will get picked up, and their therapists will rule this out. But those individuals who just have this edge are going to be labeled by themselves and other people liberally, but they really won't get to the heart of the issue. They won't know how to keep themselves safe.
We're able to detect many of the symptoms of sensory defensiveness in the first 2 weeks of life. And yet 15% of our population struggle with this issue all of their lives. Some turn to drugs and alcohol for relief. Others become addicted to jogging and other physical activity just to feel right. Some become aggressive and only feel better after a fight. And others, well, others just cope. Clinical work using these approaches are widespread, but the study of sensory defensiveness is still in its descriptive stage. The future is exciting and may bring solutions to problems yet unimagined. If even one person can be helped by this information, this project will have been worthwhile.